Father God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord. You who are our rock and our Redeemer, our strength and our Savior. I ask for the gift of preaching, and for each of us, the gift of listening and hearing and heeding. And we ask it in the strong name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Some time ago, I picked up this book again. If you could see it, it looks like it's been a little water-worn. It probably got messed up in our basement one time when we had a bit of water in the basement. But I really recommend this book. Henry Nouwen is a Roman Catholic priest who started out in places like Harvard and Yale, and he was an intellectual kind of person. But then he went to a place in France where they had handicapped people, people with disabilities, and it changed his life. And I thought, well, that's probably something I need to read. So it's called The Road to Daybreak, and I'm going to quote a couple of things from it, and especially one to start today. And my wife identifies with this passage very clearly. By the way, my wife's name is Harmony, so if I say Harmony in the service, you'll know who that is. Most of us have too much noise in our life. Too much conversation, loud music, not enough quiet. Most of you would probably like to go to Paris, France, if you've never been there. But it might be detrimental to your health. Let me read this quote, this passage, paragraph from Henry Nouwen. Paris is full of life, movement, art, music, and people of all ages, races, and nationalities. So much is going on, often at the same time, that it is hard not to feel overwhelmed. Paris is exhilarating, surprising, exciting, and stimulating, but also very tiring. And it's just like constant talk. Constant talk. When you're constantly hearing somebody talk, the radio, whatever, it's kind of draining and tiring. Quiet is very important to our lives. Now, this message came about from me experiencing people. I'm certainly not going to tell you who these people were. Probably you don't know any of them. But I detected that there were three kinds of people in life based on the theme of talking and listening. Three kinds of people. First of all, there's the person who talks too much, usually, especially about themselves. You might call them narcissistic or self-centered. They can't help but talk about what they're doing and keep a constant talk going because they don't like silence or they can't handle silence. Then there, secondly, is the person who keeps silent or shares nothing about themselves. And that might be because they are overly guarded, unable to take a risk in conversation. And then thirdly, there is the person with balance. They don't talk much, especially about themselves, and they're willing to be vulnerable and transparent and take a stand. So let's look at these three people. The person who talks too much, especially and usually about themselves, or about nothing of consequence. I actually should have started our passage in the last two verses of Proverbs 17 and not with 18 verse 1. Proverbs 17 verses 27 and 28 says, "He who spares words is knowledgeable. Even fools who keep silent are thought to be wise." Hey, you become wise just by keeping silent and not opening your mouth. Proverbs 18:2. "A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his personal opinion." And then chapter 18, verse 7. "Fools are undone by their big mouths. The mouths of fools are their ruin." Now, if I were to ask you who in the Barack Obama administration personifies this, you might be able to come up with somebody. Joe Biden, bless his heart, is getting criticized for opening his mouth and saying dumb things, things he shouldn't say, whatever. And I'm not going to nail Joe Biden without saying that I have a tendency to do the same thing. When I was doing the census a couple of weeks ago, I was coming home to my house, and there was a lady with a census badge and a census bag, and I said, a co-laborer in the census. And so I stopped my car, and I talked to her, and she was in need of some help, because in Loganville, where we live, if you have a rural delivery mailbox, you get mail from Seven Valleys Post Office, not Loganville. If you don't have a rural delivery mailbox, you get mail from the Loganville Post Office, and you have to pay money to go there. But it ain't quite that simple, because if you live on Main Street in Loganville, and you want to get mail delivered to your house, and you live on the east side of the street, you have to put your mailbox on the west side of the street. So she was a little confused about, figuring out what was going on. So I was telling her, trying to help her sort this out. And I must have said something that sounded like I wasn't doing something exactly, perfectly, correctly right. Because she went back and reported to her supervisor, and my supervisor calls me and says, what are you doing? I got this report of you. After I explained it and wrote a letter and sorted it out, it was okay. But if you talk too much, there is more opportunity for you to make a mistake and get yourself in trouble. The Living Bible is the verse that's not in chapter 17, the last verses are 18. The Living Bible, chapter 10, verse 19 says, "Don't talk so much. Turn off the flow." I love Ken Taylor, and the Living Bible is great. People can sabotage meaningful discussion with irrelevancies. They just pop off, they share all these kinds of things, and you don't feel like sharing anything deep because you know it's not going to be heard, it's not going to be responded to. Now, I have to work very carefully here. We have an extended family member. Probably no one would want to be on a desert island with this person, because it's like I read about Paris, talking all the time. You get tired and drained all the time just listening. The person talks constantly. My kids, when they were with this person in the past, used to kind of chuckle at the fact that we'd be driving along in the car and the person would read the billboards to us as we went by. Words will appear on a TV screen, like a sign on a TV screen, and the person will read the sign that's on the television show to you. If the person is reading the TV guide description of things, or a newspaper, they will constantly read to you the things that they are reading. If something happens to the person, especially something that is significant or crisis, they will have to tell everybody in the grocery store, whether they know them or not, who works at the grocery store. I had this happen to me. I'm doing well. I haven't revealed whether it's a man or a woman. Okay. The person can barely wait until you are finished talking for them to start talking about their thing. Because if you talk about something, like if you say, I went to this place, immediately when you get done, the person's going to say, I went there too, and blah, 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 and the whole thing, let me get to the point here, the person is unable to say any reflective comment. I don't know about you, but I've learned in terms of training for the ministry and being in the ministry that the way you communicate to somebody that you're listening and that you're really hearing them and caring is that you ask reflective questions. Somebody says something and you say, how did you feel about that? Or somebody, talks about something and you say, did something else happen after that? I mean, you don't immediately share your stuff. You ask a reflective question. You help them clarify what they're trying to say. The person even talks when you're in another room and there's a fan on or a TV on and you can't possibly hear. And I've begun to say, okay, you must be talking to yourself because I can't hear. The point I want to make is you don't need to share immediately everything that pops into your head because,